Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Tropical MBA podcast, where we take laptops, apply them to the grand vistas of the internet. And in return, we make that sweet, sweet location-independent income. To help you do that, we've invited the boss man, my co-hostess with the mostest, back on the program. Welcome to the show, Ian. How you been doing?
Yo, I'm doing good, man. I had a great weekend. In fact, I oversaw the lemonade stand in my front yard. My kid and all his friends in the neighborhood decided that they wanted to sell lemonade this weekend. So we helped them do that. They did mostly none of the work. It's still kind of hot here in Austin, Texas. They did very well. They made a decent amount of money, and they learned a lot about business, I think, all of them.
That's sick. Did you charge rent? That's my main thing. Did you take a cut?
I did not charge rent, but I could have, to teach them the lesson of, my property, you pay me. But I taught them some other lessons. Like at one point I came out there, and my kid especially, the whole front of his shirt was covered in some wet substance. I said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, we got thirsty." And well, what did you drink when you're out there?
He's
and you
getting high on his own supply.
Exactly. I said, "Listen, dude.
That's Biggie's first rule of business.
Number one rule of business, do not get high on your own supply." So there was that lesson and many, many more.
What we think about kids is they're hilarious. If you like stand-up comedy, you'll probably like kids. They're absolutely hilarious.
It's true.
And potentially profitable. And I'll tell you what, the lemonade game, very high margin. Because what are you putting into this? A little bit of sugar and salt and some water, some flavoring.
Yeah. I mean, there's like the cans of concentrate or whatever. I'll end this story with at night, getting ready for bed. And he likes the idea, I think, of managing more than working. So I know whose kid he is, obviously. But he started to talk to me about like what it might look like to have multiple lemonade stands.
Oh, there you
I
go.
said, well, you could do this. And then I was like, do you want to own them? Because there's this other thing called franchising. And so he was very interested with that idea of potentially franchising. I think at the end, this is a tactic to stall to not go to bed. But I think at the end, after we discussed all the options, he's ready to own all the lemonade stands and kind of take all the responsibility.
Strong move.
Yeah.
I would expect nothing less. So here at the top, Ian, a few episodes ago, we discussed a sort of roadmap for getting rich on X. Basic idea is that, the head of product at X comes out and says, like, if you want to grow an audience here, focus on a niche, focus on a customer base, post every single day. And by 6 months' time, you will have enough attention that you're going to be able to get rich off of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got a lot of texts and emails about this. People even came and started hiring for it, and we started talking strategy. And so I think it's kind of interesting for us to maybe take it a step further. Like maybe we should build a scorecard for this potential person. Maybe we should continue to workshop. And I also got some concerns. People saying, well, I don't really trust the X algorithm. So as an update, Nikita Beer obviously got a lot of DMs about this as well. And he writes on September 19th, the goal for your X timeline is to get out of the mainstream algo and the political crusades and to find your niche. Okay, so this is the primary critique is like, well, I used to love X or whatever, and now it's a bunch of political stuff. And what I really want to do is just hear about real estate all day long or just hear about longevity. Back to Nikita. You should be able to post about your interests and have friendly, relevant people chime in. If you're seeing gas station fight videos, your account is not ramped up yet. We are working every day to fix this. 14 million views on that tweet. Interestingly, Elon Musk retweeted it. And he said, the algorithm will be purely AI by November. We're recording this in September with significant progress along the way. We will open source the algorithm every 2 weeks or so. By November, or certainly December, you will be able to adjust your feed dynamically just by asking Grok. Interesting. Okay, so here's why I kind of buy this. Because when I dig deep into niches, whether it's real estate, whether it's investing, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's business ideas, whether it's, there's a lot of these cycling. There's certain niches that we all follow, keeping our eyes on. And I listen to the podcasts of the influencers in that niche or read their Substacks. And this may be an echo chamber thing, but so many of these influential or people on the front line, people that are making moves in these industries, they rely on X. Like X is where they get their alpha. And I think that's powerful. I think X has to realize that there's a tension, right? On the one hand, if we put this tweet up, it gets 10 times the views, whether that's the gas station fight video. And so now maybe I could go out and sell for advertising against that, and that's good for business. But then on the other hand, you've got, I think me and you are two examples of people who kind of rely a bit on X to kind of get the skinny on important topics. And so I think that it feels like the two people in charge of this here are saying that's the direction we're moving, which is to say, we want to highlight niche experts and we want to give them visibility and we want to give the people who care about your message increased control and visibility to that message in Q4. Everybody listening to this is an expert. And now one of the most powerful platforms comes out and says, this is exactly what we want to optimize for in Q4. So anyway, we talked about the strategy of, are you going to regret spending $10,000 publishing to X in 6 months when specifically the product team at X says that they are building for niche publishers, niche expert publishers looking for an audience? Because if they're going to do this, if they're going to replace the gas station fights in your feed, they need content partners. They need people publishing to these niches. There's only so many Nick Hubers out there talking about the storage investment game, but people who are in storage investment or in a certain kind of real estate investment or in a certain kind of longevity or a certain kind of diet space, they are hungry for more content. There's a lot of work to be done here on the platform. That's what I'm hearing. And so anyway, I kind of buy it. I think it makes sense. Like, this is what makes their product unique, is that some of the best investors in the world, some of the best thought leaders in the world, they're still relying on X, and they're kind of like figuring out their own way of getting down to the quality content, because it's kind of there now. We wish it would be easier and more available for the more casual user to find it. So I think it's extremely fascinating.
As part of this conversation too, Dan, one of our members decided that they want to hire for this position. So you've been helping them to hire for this position of essentially ghostwriting to basically boost their X account because they listen to the show and they believe in the strategy, or at least they're going to try the strategy out. I think that from a product perspective, there's a lot of people that probably use Twitter like we do. Essentially, you just don't post that much anymore, but you try and like get your feed to look pretty good because that's where you get your information. But I do think like incentivizing people to post more is what they need, like you said, to kind of build the platform. And so it's hard to know like what to do, right? So like a lot of times, you ever go to somebody's like dormant Twitter account, like a somewhat successful person, executive, whatever. And like 10 years ago, they were like, "Go Giants," hashtag baseball. And you're just like, oh, I see where that ended. So yeah, it's an interesting time. Hopefully they'll clarify it a little bit more in terms of like what you need to be successful on here. But I think a lot of people want to be successful on here. They just don't know how to do it.
First off, Nikita came out with a tweet that essentially a little bit tongue in cheek, but he basically says from 0 to 500 followers, you're a reply guy. From, 500 to 1,000, you're this. And so the information's out there. Like, let's not wait until it's fully formed as entrepreneurs to maybe take advantage of this if you really want to grow this. I think your point about the dormant accounts is interesting because I do think, and this is, of course, a negative argument against from building on someone else's platform, you could be a little bit more towards the Go Giants. Like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years. It wasn't as professionalized, and then the algorithm got blown up. And I think a lot of people just gave up because their views got dashed, and there was all this upheaval at the brand. And like you said, now it's coming back around. The top of the brand is saying, like, we don't like that. We don't like that you are looking at like kind of clickbait, horrendous, weird rage stuff happening here. We want to get back to, hey, you follow a bunch of people who are buying plumbing companies or whatever, and you talk about plumbing plus a little bit of the New York Giants. Cool. We want to get that to you, but now we need those content partners to come back and deliver for that.
This was always like the beauty of X for me, at least. You had access to people that you wouldn't traditionally have access to. And you can DM people or you can have a look into life or their business or whatever through X.
Yeah. Just a couple things that I just want to tack onto this. One strategic consideration that I think could be interesting is if you're going to start a fresh Twitter account or X account, would you do it as yourself or would you create like an anonymous persona? Because I've heard accounts of people who wrote as themselves for a while and then they switched to a persona and their subscriber count like far outperformed when they were a person. And I wonder if there's not like a little bit of a psychology there that, we say people follow people, but do they really want to follow people? Maybe they want to follow an oracle. Maybe they want to follow a brand, like a brand that they can believe in versus maybe there's something a little bit more professional, a little bit less professional at the same time. Maybe there's like some weird psychology there. But, I think if you're going to take this strategy, deciding whether you want to be like the car dealership guy versus like Clint Smith, been car dealing since 1985 or whatever, you got to decide.
If it's Clint Smith that I'm imagining, in cowboy boots and hat and like a lot of swagger, I probably want to follow Clint. But, maybe another example of that is like the Lindy Man, who we both follow. The Lindy Man is like an idea. I think if you put a person there, or I don't know who it is, I don't really care. What I care about is the Lindy principle and how that person approaches it through kind of all the content that they consume and share.
Yeah.
It's like a lens, So maybe different accounts for different things, right? Like for Lindy Man, it really works.
Maybe the way to do X in 2025 isn't to be yourself. Like that's the way to do like Facebook or something. Like, Nick Huber's done a good job of that. Is like, I'm going to be the business person who tells you what you don't want to hear, or maybe what you do want to hear a little bit, or whatever. I'm going to like dunk on people politically and like have it be underhanded a little bit. Like that's a character. And so he's embraced that character, and you got to shift and change over time. But I do think that there's an element to that where, maybe just straightforward authenticity. It just depends on the niche and stuff. But I think these are all like really interesting considerations about that positioning thing. We talked about like in any marketing, the way to make this as cost effective as possible is to narrow the spear, to position yourself in a way that's easy to follow, that people are interested. And, having like a really specific idea of what your character is going to be is much better than like, these are my thoughts, I want to express them. And it gives you like a little bit of a separation, especially when you're working with a producer, you are working with a writer, and also you're in X, which is going to be brutal. It's a brutal network relative to a lot of other ones. And so to get a little bit of distance, like, hey, this is like the ultimate car salesman. This is a character that's a part of who I am. It's not me being myself and people just ripping into me about my how I close people on insurance.
It's a great point, man. I wonder what they would say about that, those leading up product at X. Another great example of this, and not related to Twitter, but famous show Top Gear. They had the Stig, who was a professional race car driver, wore white, and he would run like these fast laps, right, to test cars to see which one was the fastest car. And the Stig changed like 4 or 5 times, and nobody ever knew who it was. They were basically the same dimensions or whatever. All you cared about was that it was the Stig.
I got an email from a listener who said, You know, the reason I wrote you this email is because you said you've probably spent $10,000 on dumber things, and that was true. And so basically inspired me to write you about this.
This person must know you well. Yeah.
Good pitch. Okay. So the idea is like, look, like you could probably hire someone from $2,000 to $4,000 a month is what we tossed out to be a part-time ghostwriter and kind of like strategic shepherd towards you understanding the algorithm and getting to this point where you could potentially become rich off an account, which is the promise. Okay, so we called up Greg at remotefirstrecruiting.com. That's a shameful plug. And we said, look, Greg, we've got some people reaching out to us about this. We got to get on the stick here. So what Greg came back with was, he basically said, look, I think that's fair. You can hire somebody at $2,000 a month to like write all this stuff. The problem is they're not going to have a track record of having done this for logos before, for big brands, right?
At that price point.
At that price point. Okay. So he comes back and says, look, there are agencies doing this for $4,000 to $5,000 a month, and they're doing the one tweet a day. And when we look at the track record, we're seeing that indeed they can share receipts. So I do think that's kind of where we're at right now. Like my initial pitch a few weeks ago on the pod was like $2,000 to $4,000, 5 tweets a day. Now, I don't know if 5 tweets a day is what you need to do. Maybe, you know, you have these really good kind of like pillar tweets that happen every day, and then you become a reply person the rest of the day, or, you know, everybody's going to have to figure out the workflow that works for their niche. But I do think it's interesting that, you know, yeah, like, okay, on the high end, you could get somebody super reputable and just plug and play their system in for $4,000 to $5,000 a month. That checks out.
Well, Nikita had a product that X said it's once a day. You could do more than once a day. But Greg basically went out within a couple of days and he found somebody, which I thought was pretty cool. So we'll see how it turns out. When I hear $4,000 a month for one tweet a day, I'm like, man, maybe that should be my business. but when you do one tweet a day and it gets 2 likes, you think this isn't worth it. But let's imagine like it gets, you know, thousands of likes and a bunch of eyes on it. Well, then all of a sudden, one tweet a day is all you need.
Yeah, I think you should start an account called the Lemonade and Tweets Guy, and then high margin, great customers.
You know where it ends, man. I just end up selling concentrate.
All right, cool. So the getting rich on Twitter saga continues. We will continue to track this story. Got a handful of listeners in touch with us who are in various stages of executing on this. And so hopefully it'll be interesting to follow along and see how everybody's doing. This leads to 2 topics I want to jump into. So here's the question of the first topic. What is the system at the heart of having others operate your business on your behalf? We talked about bringing in a third party to do work on our behalf, making a budget for it. And I just kind of want to get back to basics because, look, like probably the number one challenge that listeners of this show express is, I feel stuck in my business. Kobe Bryant at one time was the best basketball player on the planet, and he still worked on his footwork all the time. So I think it's important that we like get rid of the noise. Okay, it's exciting. We're going to go out on X and get rich. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But like, what is the system at the heart of having others operate a business on your behalf? In other words, getting leverage so you can work on growing your business. You can work on your business, not in it. There's a bunch of different approaches to this, but I wanted to point to like a really simple one that I listened to on a podcast many moons ago and took a note. It was with Leila Hormozi. So Alex Hormozi's wife, who is the COO of his business empire. And she's kind of like running the ship. She has this wonderful podcast called Moving from a Solopreneur Mindset to an Operator Mindset. And I think she really elegantly defines this core footwork of getting others to operate your business on your behalf. She kind of opens the episode by talking about the challenges a lot of founders face with delegation. In fact, I think delegation is so complicated that there's challenges on both sides, because you could say, well, most founders don't delegate because they're fearful to lose control. And so she says, don't worry, I'll teach you how to delegate with control. Now, I'm going to share the methodology here in a minute, but I also think there's concern on the other side. In fact, we are so fearful of delegating that when an opportunity comes along to delegate, we kind of do it super quick. It's like, sweet, somebody's here, just take care of it. In fact, I kid you not, in interactions with listeners over the past few weeks, I've seen this no less than 4 times. I've counted this exact thing, which is, we'll call it like the wipe your hands off hire. Like, cool, somebody's here now, they're going to do it because I am, insert your thing, too busy, too tired, too free, too awesome, too visionary. And what I wanted to talk about really quickly was Leila's thinking about what the delegation process is and the important idea that somebody in the company needs to be the person in charge of it. Okay. And I think this is the challenge, is like, for those of us who feel stuck in our business, like, well, delegating is also a big job too. So what's that point at which you hire somebody to be the primary delegator? That would be your like GM. It could be a super VA. It could be your COO. There's like different revenue levels. We talk about this a lot over the years, but at some point you can indeed put this process onto someone else's plate. The reality is it's often on our plate, and there's so many other things on our plate that it's really hard to give this fundamental footwork the attention it deserves. So I'll lay out the 4 steps at the top level here for you and get your reaction. So essentially, there's this initial phase when you're going to delegate, the investigation stage. You're trying to sort of dig in and pull out information about what the system really is that you're looking to delegate. You might already know this really well if you do it regularly. The second step is essentially the 3 Ds. It's to demonstrate, it's to document, and is to duplicate. And then you loop back around to the first D, and you have the person that duplicated it demonstrate it back to you. And I thought it was just like, wow, this is like cool. It's simple. I like it. There's some nuances we can dig into here. For me, like, the demonstration phase is often quite tiresome. So I think I'll try to skip it, And this is the one I see amongst TMBA listeners a lot, is like, I just want to kind of skip demonstration phase. The document phase, the nuance there is that the person you demonstrated to would document the process back to you. So they're documenting, you're not documenting it as they're training, essentially. And then the duplicate phase is you would actually watch them duplicate it. And so I know there's like, as I'm going through this, there's already like eye rolls from the audience, like, that's a lot. And this is kind of like why you sort of race to hire a GM or somebody who can like run the company. Because if you're like demonstrating, documenting, and duplicating for every key system in your business, and then having to maybe re-update those systems as things change, that is a lot. And doing it well, if it is both important and costly, then the idea that you are indeed stuck in your business could be a very fair conclusion. But really, it's like, there's one of 2 things that are going to happen when you bring an agency or an individual into your company. You will demonstrate to them exactly how to do the job, or they will demonstrate to you exactly how to do the job. And then once you go through the other 2 Ds that are less important, the duplicate and the document part, there will be another demonstration where the other person does it back. This isn't something that we've talked about in a while or revisited. And this is why I'm kind of pulling it up, because it feels like this is a great thing to jump back in and to ask ourselves, like, do we have a culture of this stuff? Do we demand that there's a demonstration for everything? It's kind of exciting because I'm listening to Leila thinking like, well, dang, maybe we just kind of took their word for it that they were going to do it that way, And I think it's easy to do because like taking their word for it takes an acknowledgement of an email. And then you can pulse and cycle back in 30 days and take a look at the progress. But doing the demonstration part, well, that could be like a 2-hour call. And I got a lot of 2-hour calls, so maybe I'll just skip the call. And I think that that's the trap, or that is the temptation there, is to like skip this concept of demonstration, or not having someone on the team whose role it is to, solicit and give demonstrations. So like if you were to hire this $5,000 a month Twitter person, it's very easy to imagine. You say like, man, I spent $5,000 a month. I'm spending like $300 a tweet, man. This is like, make me look cool online. I'll talk to you in 30 days. I'll talk to you in 7 days. And just, replace demonstration with demand. I'm just going to demand that you do really great. I'll probably be cool about it for like 90 days, but then like, I'm really going to start to lose patience.
Right.
Or the other option is, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for this. I'm happy to spend the money. Let's start with the first step, which is like, I'd like you to demonstrate for me how you're going to do this. And there is this correlation with entrepreneurs that have admirable elements to the way they think about their business and the level of detailed knowledge they have about what goes on. If there's a lot of stuff going on in your business, you can only do so many demos, which is why we want to scale to get somebody to do this in our business on our behalf. That's the GM, the COO, stuff like that. But if we're still stuck, it's really a question of, can you identify that pivotal system that you either need to demonstrate or somebody else needs to demonstrate, and get it on paper so that it can be duplicated and you can get to that next level? Okay, Ian, we've got so many topics to cover. Maybe we should do a daily pod.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
We got an email from a listener who was curious about our comments on Thailand and Chiang Mai. And I'll just mention this because we're both flying to Bangkok here in a few weeks. And this listener writes, yes, I'm a city person. So Chiang Mai is not my long-term vibe, but I've been nomading for 10 years and Thailand is completely undefeated. Lack of friction, high trust society, polite, welcoming locals. There are other places in Asia that sort of function the same way, but nothing stacks up. And as Ian mentioned, any weird thing they were missing a decade ago are all solved. Latin America, Europe, and America are far behind, like that old Candlebox song. Oh, and you can wear your valuables anywhere, which is certainly not the case in all countries nowadays, which is kind of a bummer. Here's what I'll leave with this thought experiment. I think Thailand is goated when it comes to relative value, but I do not know in terms of maximum value. So here's an interesting thought experiment when you're considering the digital nomad trend. Certainly early on when I was doing digital nomading and getting the opportunity to be abroad, a lot of it was about culture. I would buy 5 books about the history of the country. I'd read those books at cafes in those countries. I would meet locals in those countries. I would go on trips and adventures. And it was just really freaking fun to like learn about a place that's not your home. Like that's one of the coolest experiences in the world. Like we walk around Spain and we hear about who St. George was and why his blood's all over the flag. And it's like, whoa, that's sick. That's Spanish people really got something cool going on here. Let's learn more about it. That's part of it. But really, a lot of digital nomading is you could kind of break it down to consumption behaviors. Over the long haul, digital nomading is about getting a good deal on your work. Sometimes it's about living wealthy before you would be considered wealthy in your home country. It's like, you see all these like threads on Reddit. It's like escape wherever I'm from. And it's sort of like, I'm living like a king in wherever. I'm living like a queen in wherever. It's the make dollars, spend rupees mindset. A long way of getting to this idea of I do think this like basic consumer ratio is that so much of what inspires digital nomading at the end of the day. It's like, where can I get a great relative value? But I think it's worth asking the question. If you could, in your mind, imagine that every place, the core goods that you care about were the same price, then where would you elect to live? And I think it's worth asking that question for your long-term goals. So that was a thought that jumped into my mind. I mention it because it's kind of like, it does make me go, like if America was as good of a deal as Chiang Mai, would Chiang Mai come up as much? Or how much would it come up in that context? And I do think it changes the conversation quite a bit.
It does. The reality is, the price isn't the same. I'll tell you what, it's that Thailand is nowhere close to America right now, but things are getting more expensive.
Yeah.
As these countries kind of figure out what the delta really is and what kind of value they're providing and who their customer is. Certainly starting to see it in Spain. It's, 2 to 3 times as expensive as it used to be. And Thailand is still relatively inexpensive, but getting to be more expensive.
And I just got to say, speaking of like the reality and the value of money, is ridiculously expensive right now. Just like on the street, and it's a decent argument for Thailand and like a $2 lunch. Like you just like look in the direction of a grocery store in America, you're at $100. It is ridiculous how much things cost. And I just feel like there's got to be some kind of reckoning that happens here, because salaries aren't going up, unemployment isn't going down, and everybody's terrified that they're going to get fired because they probably are, because that's what's happening with the effect of AI on these large tech companies. Like they're literally cutting staff and growing both revenue and profit. So would you choose Thailand if it were the same price as America?
My answer is I would choose nowhere all the time. So that's why I got into this game, is because I want to be able to decide based on the weather, based on the price, based on how I'm feeling. This comes up in conversation all the time. For me, Dan, it's simple. We're living in a time, the first time in human history that we know of, although aliens and all that, we could have done some interesting things in the past. The first time
before the Younger Dryas,
where you can get on a plane and be anywhere in the world for like $1,000. If you're not taking advantage of that, we might not be friends.
Wherever we go, it's not going to affect our income. So that's the sick part. So whatever happens with Thailand, Spain, these places that we love and like to spend time in, it's like one of these things where it's like the only constant is change. That's it for today, Ian. We both got calls to get to, so we'll wrap it up for today. That's the TMBA podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Thursday morning.
See you then.